I've had the Sense Energy Monitor installed for 1 full year, and so I'm going to talk about my experiences with it, some of the issues that I've faced, some of the changes that I've made, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned for that. What's going on, fellow engineers? Thank you for checking out my channel. If this is your first time to the channel, please be sure to check out some of the other content that I have here. Each week I do a technology related video in the field of programming or just IT in general. And also I do DIY videos on Saturdays for my Saturday project series. So if you're interested in either of those topics, please be sure to subscribe and click the bell to get notifications. As I mentioned in the opener, I have had the Sense Energy Monitor installed for a year now, and I've had to make some adjustments to, my habits, in addition to some of the electrical components that I have and a number of other things. And so if you've been subscribed to this channel since I've had it installed, you've noticed that I've done a couple of videos periodically on the Sense Energy Monitor. And so this will be another video in that review video series. If you have not watched those previous videos, I will have a link to the description down in there somewhere, so you can go check out those other videos, because there are some things that I discovered early on that I may not necessarily cover in this video, but I did talk about them in previous videos. I did a export of the data that I have, or Sense has collected on my energy usage, or electrical energy usage that is, since I've been using it, and I kind of skimmed through it. You can get a export of the data if you go on your computer to the Sense web app, and then when you go to the usage screen, it'll allow you to export based upon time period. And so I did a daily data export. If you want, you can also do a hourly data export. And so from that export, I found out several of the following statistics. I have an always on average usage for the entire year of 172 watts. My average usage consists of mostly the router, my modem, several network devices, smart switches and outlets, and a few other components. I have a media server that stays on 24/7. All of those devices make up my always on usage. And the goal of the always on usage is, if you reduce the always on usage, then you can reduce your power bill or power consumption. And one of those goals that I'm planning on doing, I'll discuss that a little bit later in the video, but is to make some adjustments in various areas so that I can bring that always on usage down. Also from the export, I was able to find out that I used the dishwasher 62 days of the last year. I used the oven 80 days in the last year. I used the air conditioner 150 days, the furnace 135 days, and if you do the math, 365 days in a year, 150 and 135 from 365 means that 80 days I did not use heat or AC at all. And also, I found out that the Sense Energy Monitor was offline 182 times within the last year. Now, the export data does not tell you how long Sense is offline. What I did a count of the number of emails that Sense sent that Sense sent stating that the device was offline, and so that count from the entire year was 182. Something that I have not done that I'm going to do in this video is actually go through one of the usage reports that I've gotten. This is the most recent usage report that I received at the recording, or the time of the recording of this video. So we'll go ahead and jump into that. And so here you see that for the month of June, because I'm actually recording this in July, that in the month of June, I had an average wattage of 1,355 watts. and compare that to the rest of the people in my state, it says here that I am using less usage than 83% of the Sense users in the state of Alabama, which is where I'm located. My total usage for the entire month was 980 kilowatt hours, and my always on wattage was 111 watts. Now, the always on wattage, if you're not familiar with Sense, is the wattage that is being used over the previous 48 hours. So every day it takes it captures that amount, and then this report here basically gives you the average of the entire month. So had 111 watts, which is pretty decent. As you see here, I am lower than 92% of the Sense users in the state of Alabama. So I think that's pretty good. Also, in the monthly usage report, it gives you the new devices that it has detected. And as you see here, I have AC2. Come to find out, when I actually looked at what AC2 was, it wasn't a new air conditioner unit. It was my existing central AC outdoor unit that it had already previously detected. And so for some reason, it found it again. I'm not sure if that's because I rearranged some of the wires in the panel to better accommodate Sense, because I was having offline connectivity issues. Another reason that it could be is because the contactor in my AC unit actually went out last year after I had got Sense, and I think after it detected the AC unit registered. And so because it has a new contactor in it, it may see that the electrical signal may have changed on that because of that new part. So I'm not fully sure why that's the case, but those are the reasons that I think that may be why it says, hey, you have a new AC unit. Now, the last part of the monthly usage report that you get from Sense, it will note any significant energy changes. And so right now, it is, at the time of this recording, it is the heat of the summer, not exactly the hottest part of summer because it is July. Usually August is hotter than July for us in the state of Alabama. And so, but compared to last month and the month before that, so June and May, it is reporting that I have had significant energy changes. So some of these are my weekday average has spiked by 104% on June 19th compared to my average weekday. My weekly usage has went up by 62%. My weekday average went up by 106%. And my all-time usage peaked at 6:09 p.m. on June the 3rd with 17,424 watts. My previous all-time high was 16,795 watts. Now, why that may be the case, I did change the strategy of how my home does cooling. I live in a 1.5 story, and if you are familiar with houses that have multiple levels with a single zone system, you'll know that usually that heating and cooling does not level out as it should if everything was on the same level like a single story home. And so I tried to do something different to try to make things a little bit more comfortable. So I think that has played into the all-time high usage being achieved. And so these are the, I guess, numbers, if you will, that it will report. You can set Sense to send you these notifications exactly when they happen, or you can wait until the monthly email comes out. Depending on what the notifications are, like the significant usage increase, sometimes I'll have them turned on, but here recently I've turned them off, and I just make it a note to periodically check the Sense app to see if it has noted that there has been an increase in the amount of usage that I have. I have two major complaints with Sense. They're in no particular order, but they are something that I've noticed that I kind of wish could be addressed, that I have mentioned. But one of these complaints I did mention to Sense, the other I did not. And so the first complaint is the confusion between devices. As I mentioned in a previous video about Sense, the refrigerator light and the heating element on my furnace were being confused by Sense. And so whenever the heating element on the furnace would kick on, which it would only run for about 10 to 15 seconds, enough to ignite the gas and then shut off. Since what's confusing it for the refrigerator light, which usually when I go in the refrigerator, I open the door, grab what I need, close it back, again, roughly 10 to 15 seconds. And for that reason, it was saying the refrigerator light was being opened at 2 and 3:30 in the morning. Clearly, I'm asleep at that time. There's no way the refrigerator light would be on unless something else electrically is wrong with the refrigerator, which I do not believe it is. For that reason, I complained to Sense about it, and they made one adjustment. It didn't really fix the issue, so they made another adjustment, which resulted in them actually removing the refrigerator light and the heating element out of the system, and for the device to relearn it. But when it relearned it, it still had that same problem, so that didn't address anything. The second complaint that I have is the difficulty in Sense to detect multiple devices of the same type. What do I mean by this? I have two attic fans, one on the south facing side of the house and one on the west facing side of the house. Oftentimes the one will kick on before the other, but if they're both running at the same time, what happens is Sense will say your attic fan is on, and it will actually show the wattage that one fan is using, but then the other fan, when it kicks on, it populates into the other bubble. So you have no idea whether it is actually on or not. And what I've noticed is sometimes the attic fan, it'll complain about, hey, the attic fan is on too long. But what in actuality is one of them kicked on, then the second one kicked on, and then the first one turned off, but the second one is still running. And so it'll be like, hey, your attic fan is running longer than normal. And in actuality, it's not running longer than normal. It's just they kicked on at different times, but because they have the exact same motor, they appear to Sense to be the exact same device, just running differently. So I don't know of a way to fix that. I didn't complain to Sense about that one. And reason being, I know that the fans are exactly the same, and because they're exactly the same, a lot of times they have the same exact electrical signature. So I didn't think that was really big of an issue. However, the data for that fan running is still being captured in my usage, so I'm not too concerned about not being able to distinguish the difference between one fan versus the other. Since having the energy monitor put in, I've chosen to make some changes to not only some of the bulbs that I'm using in my house, but then also it has helped me detect problems with various electrical components. One of those issues was the attic fan. I had an attic fan that was running at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning when it should not have been. And that was kind of concerning when I was up early. I couldn't sleep one night and woke up and hey, let me check the energy usage right now. And I noticed it was higher than usual. My always on usage is roughly between 120 and 140. So anything beyond that, like 200 and above, I know something is running that I probably did not turn off, but should have turned off. And so when I actually got to looking into it, I realized the attic fan was on at 5 o'clock in the morning, which it should not be, because the thermostat was set at roughly 95 to 100 degrees, and it was not 95 or 100 degrees up there, because I went up there and didn't break a sweat. And when I looked at it, I think part of the reason why the attic fan was running is because the thermostat was turned, it's supposed to be turned this way, but it was actually turned that way. And so I'm thinking because of it being mounted incorrectly, it was running incorrectly as well. So what I did is I made the adjustment to the temperature setting on it. So I raised the temperature up so that it would not kick on, unless it was actually closer to that actual degrees. At some point I will actually try to probably mount that thermostat correctly, but at the moment, the immediate concern was get the fan off, because it definitely did not need to be running, and that's what I did. Another change that I was able to make was to use it to help me analyze issues with my air conditioner. As I previously mentioned, the contactor on my AC unit went out and I had no idea. It went out in the middle of the night, and I woke up that morning, was like, it felt kind of warmer than usual, but I really didn't give it too much thought. But then when I left, went to work, came back after work, the house was blazing hot compared to what it usually is, and that was a red flag. And that's when I went to start looking into it to see what was going on. And as I took all the components out, I realized, okay, the contactor is bad. Well, then let me see when it actually stopped working. And so when I went in the Sense app, I was able to pull up the timeline for the air conditioner. And what happened was it kicked on at around 1 a.m. and it literally ran for maybe like a second and shut back off. And the graph in Sense reflected that that basically there was a spike and then it dropped back down, and that was the wire being burned off. I talk about that condenser and the contactor thing in another video, so you can check that out. I won't deep dive on that here. The next thing is that I set up a notification in Sense that will notify me if the refrigerator runs longer than normal. And the reason I did this is because sometimes when you close the refrigerator, the door, normally when you close the refrigerator, the door will slam shut and stay shut. But sometimes when I close the refrigerator, and particularly if I close the freezer, the refrigerator door sometimes will pop open, not open enough to actually turn on the light in the refrigerator, but enough that the cold air in the refrigerator is allowed to escape. And what I did to try to mitigate that, yes, I could have used sensors and all kinds of other things, but what I did was I know that my refrigerator, if it is closed and I don't go into it at all, that it will run roughly about 45 minutes to an hour per cycle. And so in the Sense app, I went in and set an alert that says that if the refrigerator runs longer than an hour and 30 minutes, so because I wanted to give it a little bit of buffer, because like if I do go in the refrigerator, I notice that it'll run maybe additional 15 minutes or so, and that's just going in, grabbing out, let's say, a piece of chicken or something to drink, and then closing it back. It will run maybe an additional 15 minutes. So I didn't set it at exactly 45 minutes or exactly an hour. I set it at an hour and a half. And based off of that, if I get that alert that, hey, the refrigerator is running longer than an hour and a half, I go and check to see, well, did I accidentally leave the refrigerator, cracked open a little bit or something of that nature? And if I did, then I can close it. If not, great. Another change that I've made is replacing the incandescent bulbs with LEDs. I have a number of ceiling fans, and pretty much all of those ceiling fans have had incandescent bulbs since I moved in. And once I got Sense and I started going around flipping things on and flipping them off to see how my energy usage changed, I realized that the ceiling fans, they have 40-watt bulbs in them, sometimes 50-watt bulbs, and you multiply that times 4 bulbs, or in some cases 5 bulbs in some of my ceiling fans. 40 times 4, that's 160 watts. That's a lot of usage when you could get an LED and justify the cost for it. Not to mention LEDs last way longer, so you actually receive the benefit of doing that. And so I switched a lot of those out to LEDs. There were some that I had some incandescence in that I ended up swapping out for CFLs because I had some CFLs on hand. So instead of buying LED bulbs, I was like, just use the CFLs that you already have on hand, which I did. Now, there are some fixtures that I did not swap out, like the bulbs in the microwave. They have incandescence. Supposedly, if you put CFLs in there, that may interact with the gases in the bulb and cause it to blow up, which is not something that you want to have happen in your microwave, because it could also result in your microwave being destroyed. So I left the incandescence in on the microwave. Also, I left the incandescence in on the refrigerator. Again, the refrigerator has that special use case. One, to my knowledge, they do not make certain appliance bulbs in LED form, and my refrigerator has some of those bulbs that they're only made in incandescent. So I had to get an incandescent for that. But then also the refrigerator is a cold environment. CFLs don't, the gas in the CFL bulb doesn't do well in colder than normal environments. And LEDs, they probably could tolerate the colder temperature, but it may take a while, depending on the design of the bulb, it may take a while for that bulb to get up to the ideal brightness for a refrigerator bulb. And so I didn't bother about getting LED replacements for the refrigerator either. I have smart outlets installed on a number of devices, in particular like TVs and other systems that have multiple components. And the reason being is because if you have that smart outlet, you can remotely switch it on or switch it off. I have some smart outlets on some other devices, more so for the being able to control them from anywhere. But the smart outlet, if you have those, you are able to control the number of devices and you don't have to get up and, you know, being able to switch them off, be like, oh yeah, I left the TV on, let me switch it off since the house is empty, and you can do that remotely. So that was one of the benefit things of it. Another benefit is to be able to leverage the automation system for controlling those smart outlets. Another upgrade that I made was installing a smart thermostat. In the past, I have set the thermostat to hold at a specific temperature and then ended up leaving home and forgot to set it to go into away mode. Well, that's a problem because now it's maintaining that temperature even though the home is empty. And while that thermostat did have a schedule, because it was a programmable thermostat, given the changes, especially now with the coronavirus situation and a lot of people doing more working from home and so forth, a lot of times that schedule changed. And if I did go out, it would, you know, it didn't justify me reprogramming the thermostat for me to go out. Also, the thermostat that I had was a 7-day programmable thermostat, meaning when you programmed it for whatever schedule you had, it followed that same schedule for every day of the week. The smart thermostat that I have now allows you to change the schedule for each individual day of the week, because I know for me, I am not doing the same thing Monday through Friday that I'm doing for Saturday and for Sunday, especially now with coronavirus, because my schedule is completely different because of that, and I'm sure yours probably is too. So the smart thermostat allows me to be able to make those adjustments, and if I forget to change the setting while I'm out, I can, you know, easily pick up my phone, say, hey, I'm not at the house, change it to away mode, and go from there. And that helps save some energy as well. The last change or adjustment that I had to make with the Sense Energy Monitor is to build an automation that would detect to see if Sense was online, meaning connected to the router or not. And the reason being is because now Sense has if your device is not connected to the Sense server, then after maybe an hour or so, the Sense server will send you an email and also a push notification to let you know that it's not connected, so that you can take whatever steps necessary to be able to get the Sense device connected back to the Sense servers. That automation that I built would actually go and check my router to see if the Sense device was connected to the router, obviously via Wi-Fi, and if not, to reboot the router to try to get it to reconnect. And the reason being is because my router is indoors, but my electrical panel as well as the Sense are outdoors, and they're also on the opposite ends of the house. So the signal strength is not as strong because, one, it has to go between an exterior wall, and then two, it's on the opposite end of the house, which is roughly 20 to 30 feet between an exterior wall and between a floor, because my router is on the upper level and the panel is on the lower level. So a number of variables that take place that reduce that signal strength. And so that automation ideally was able to address that, but sometimes even now it's still not. And I think a lot of that when it's not able to is in part because of what is happening with the weather. So sometimes when the weather gets too hot or when it gets too cold, I think that plays an impact on the signal strength. So since having the Sense Energy Monitor, I have come up with a list of changes to make in addition to the ones that I've already made. That list of changes to make include installing more insulation and doing air sealing, especially for the second story or half story of my home. And the reason being is because from that, I've noticed like the upper story will get warmer because hot air rises, cold air sinks, but also because of the fact I have knee walls on the second story, and in some spots that insulation that is behind the knee wall has fallen out, and I'm thinking that has contributed to the higher temperatures that happen on the upper story, which goes into the greater consumption of electricity. Also, the upper story does not have the blocking between the first and second floor, and so that allows whatever outdoor air to blow in between, further reducing the comfort level in the home and increasing the energy consumption to maintain that comfort level. So I'm trying to, we'll have to mitigate that, and hopefully that'll bring some things down. Another change that I'm going to make is to add more automations, more so for the home and away states. And this will hopefully, when I leave home and pretty much set the house to away mode, or when the thermostat is set to an away state, that a number of other automations, such as turning off certain devices like TVs and so forth, will take place to be able to reduce that energy consumption. I realized that by having those automations in place, you don't have to remember to do everything. You just have to remember to trigger one thing, like press a button, flip a switch or something of that nature. And then with the automation, everything else that'll happen will happen and hopefully result in you reducing the amount of energy that you're using. The next automation that I wanted to look up is to also have a notification that, let's say when I go to sleep, that the wattage level is tracked with some exceptions. So I know my average usage, my always on usage is between 120 and 140 watts. So if I go to bed and that wattage is way higher than that, with the exception of like the AC or heat running, or maybe the dishwasher running, then I get a notification that, hey, there's something running that probably shouldn't be running, and then I can go and look into it. Maybe I left a light on, maybe a device is plugged in that should not be plugged in, maybe the attic fan is running late at night when it shouldn't be. So something like that would ideal, that I'm trying to look into, and that would grouped into the previous point of having automated, having a home automation that would be able to detect all of that. One other thing I'm going to do is also start using more smart outlets than what I'm using. That way I'm able to switch more devices on and off as I need to. And that way I'm also able to do those even when I'm not at home, in case I leave something on accident. Relocating the router. The router, as I mentioned, I have a lot of issues with connectivity between Sense and the router. So by relocating the router, or maybe even adding an additional router, I'm going to hopefully mitigate those Sense offline alerts because of the signal strength. Another thing will be to reduce the number of online always on devices. Right now I have 3 network switches. Part of the plan to ideally get those network switches down to maybe 2 or ideally even 1 network switch. And the reason being is because each network switch, draws power, and because of how I have devices laid out in the home, it's not right now. I'm not able to set up 1 network switch to be able to handle everything. So part of reducing the number of network switches is to run wiring for the entire home for Ethernet and low voltage wiring, so that everything runs to a central panel, and then all of those network switches are in a single location instead of scattered about the home, unless they absolutely have to be scattered about the home. But I think I can do that without scattering. So even if I get it down to 2 network switches instead of 3, that would help bring down the always on consumption. Another change I want to make is solar attic fans. The solar attic fans are, as you know, powered by the sun, and they'll run as long as sun is out. Furthermore, you can get the setup do a setup that uses a battery backup, and so when the sun goes down, if the attic temperature is still above a certain set point, then the fan will switch from running off solar panels to running off the battery. In my setup, I don't know if I'm going to do that or not with the battery or just solar panel, but I do want to switch to solar, and the reason being is my attic fans use 200 watts when running, and there is no low power, high power. It's either on or off, and I have two attic fans, as I previously mentioned, and so that's 400 watts. And in this time of year, July, August time of year, the attic fans roughly run about 10, maybe 12 hours per day. And so you can do the math and compute the kilowatts per hour for that. And so by offloading that to the sun, which is the main reason why you have those attic fans, that would help reduce my overall energy consumption that is being pulled from the grid and offloaded to the sun. One other thing I want to do is to also do zoned heating and cooling. So as I mentioned, I live in a 1.5 story house. The entire house is on a single zone system, so that often makes things not comfortable for the half story. And so by doing a zone system, the system that covers the larger area of the home can be reduced to that zone, and then the upper story have its own zone, and that way they can be managed independently, and also ideally reduce the amount of power consumption, since I'm not having to run the large system to keep the entire home at a set temperature. Instead, I can use that zone system to just govern the smaller space with the smaller zone. Changes that I wish I could make. There are several that I wish I could do to better reduce my energy consumption, but I know I can't do without either. In some cases, I can't do them at all. Some of these I can do, but they require a large expense that I can't really justify. So one of which is installing smart light wall switches, the ones on the wall that control the light in a room. And the reason being is because my house was built in the 1970s, when the design or the wiring code back then stated that you did not have to have the main wire for a fixture in a room to come to the switch. Instead, the main wire comes to the fixture, and then there is what is known as a switch leg that is used. Well, if you have smart switches, you can't use, they're not designed to be used with switch leg systems. They do have some that do exist that are roughly $50 to $75 that will work with a switch leg system, but the cost of those are way more than what I'm willing to pay, especially when you get like a smart switch for roughly $30 to $35 each, and that's just for a standard smart switch, versus the one that's designed to work with switch legs or $50 to $75. I can't justify that cost. I'm not going to do smart switches. Worst case scenario, I leave a light on, it will be on. Ideally, most of the lights I have now are CFL or LED, so it won't be drawing as much power. The next thing that I wish I could do, but again, I won't be doing because it has a substantial expense, is moving the breaker panel from outside to inside. The reason being is because sense has to be in the breaker panel, and if sense starts acting up, which it does sometimes, especially when it comes to the sense not being connected, I have to go outside, flip the breaker off, then flip it back on and close it back up. And that's a lot, especially if it's like raining or really, really cold, sometimes like 20 or 30 degrees in the wintertime. That is a lot that you have to do. So, and a lot of times when it's like that, if it complains about being offline, I just won't even go outside to flip it off. Like, I just leave it like it is. So that could be remedied by moving the panel indoors, but the cost of rewiring, pretty much getting a new panel to put indoors, then having to rerun the wires to the new panel location, and all that, I can't justify the expense. Sense for me does not detect devices that are on surge protectors or UPS, which is pretty much all of the electronics that I have. TVs, computers, security, you name it, it's probably on the power strip. And Sense has not detected any of these. Now, I don't know if it's just a flaw in Sense, or I don't know if it's just not able to read what that signature, electrical signature is through that surge protection device. Not fully sure, but this is something that I wish that could be changed. And I know what you're thinking. Well, yeah, you could plug those electronics directly into the wall, but I'd rather not do that, especially for the ones that are on UPSs, because if you plug the device directly into the wall, then you can't use the benefit of the UPS, which is battery backup. So I wish I could, but I can't. And the last thing is to be able to reboot Sense without having to actually go into the breaker panel. You know, I wish that, like, you have to use your phone to connect Sense to the internet. So you do the configuration, the initial Wi-Fi setup. Well, I wish there was a way that Sense could be, you could connect to Sense from your phone, even after it's already set up, to tell it to restart. And the reason being, as I mentioned, my breaker panel is outside. Sometimes it has connectivity issues. So ideally, I wish, go to the phone, open the Sense app. All right, it shows you Sense is offline, and so there'll be an option in there that says, well, connect to Sense directly, and you can be able to do that. And then from that direct connection, say reboot Sense. Is it possible with the app? Yes. Have I requested that feature to be implemented? No. Will I do so? Probably will, just to give an option. Because like I say, for me, it's a pain to have to go outside to go into the breaker to restart it. So that will wrap things up for this video. I know it was probably a little bit longer than what you thought it would be, but I wanted to make sure I covered as much detail as I could. Again, if you have not already, you can go watch the previous reviews that I've done. So please be sure to go check those out. A lot more details also included, those that I did not cover here. If you have any questions about Sense or my experience with Sense, put them in the comments. I do read the comments. I do respond to the comments. Put them in the comments. I will get back to you. If you don't want to put your question in the comments, you can drop me a message on Instagram or Twitter. So until the next time, peace out.